So good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you in the dark part of the hotel, because I was on the last floor. We have a beautiful view here, a beautiful view on the audience. And thank you, Cecilia, and congratulations for organizing this successful conference. Today, many contributions focus on some of the core priorities of my portfolio, from artificial intelligence to data flows. These technological challenges are nothing new to Europeans. Already in 1986, Jacques Delors described the Single European Act as relating mainly to economics and technology. He saw technology as a top European priority at the time. This has not changed if you look to the discussions that we have now in Europe and with some partners. Today, technological developments represent a major opportunity for European citizens. In our work at the European Commission, our priority is to continue protecting European values while also embracing technological development. We try to support innovation and to protect the fundamental values. This was also set out by the Member States in the Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles, for example. And in practice, it has translated into landmark regulations like the GDPR, and in the most recent initiatives, the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act, the Data Act, and the Data Governance Act. The GDPR is the foundation ensuring adequate protection of citizens' personal data. This does not only apply within the EU, this is also the case when data is transferred outside the Union. Following the ruling by the European Court of Justice on the Privacy Shield, I negotiate on behalf of the Commission new safeguards for redress for European citizens with the US, and it was very important that we have a recourse for redress for all the European citizens in the US. The outcome ensures, I'm sure, an effective protection of the personal data when data travels outside the Union. Our goal is to implement all the requirements of the European Court of Justice. That means, on one side, concerning the access of intelligence agencies to the personal data, a real implementation of the true principle of necessity and proportionality. And on the other side, I said the redress, the possibility for European citizens to have an access to judicial redress when they have some concern about the access to their data. And again, we have a solid solution now that we try to put into place. And the main goal is to be sure that the protection that we are given in Europe is traveling with the data. And we try to do that with a verification of the protection given in partners' country. We don't have the same protection, but a real good level of protection in comparison with what we are organizing in Europe. Of course, we are taking into account the different systems in the different partners' countries. With regard to artificial intelligence, as you have discussed today, the European Union will soon have the world's first regulatory framework, an AI Act. Our risk-based approach will ensure maximum safety for consumers while safeguarding fundamental rights again. Our proposal for AI liability rules complements the AI Act and ensures remedies for consumers in case of accidents. Indeed, we believe that victims of damage caused by AI should have the same level of protection as victims of damage caused by other technologies. We cannot let risk undermine public trust before the transformative potential of AI has been unlocked. And businesses need certainty over their liability risks to keep innovating. Our proposal covers both. In building a digital single market, the European Union is also working to defend Europe's strong consumer protection framework. The principle is simple. We need to make sure that consumers are as protected online as they are offline. And as we witness developments in the digital world every day, we must also ensure that consumer law reflects these evolutions. This is why we are currently carrying out a digital fitness check to assess whether our consumer legislation should be updated. For example, do our current rules do enough to tackle dark patterns? Are we effectively regulating influencer marketing? Can we make it easier for consumers to cancel their online subscriptions? On influencer marketing, for example, we are talking about a global industry worth an estimated 20 billion euro today. And according to our own research, we see that 74% of consumers feel that paid promotions are not transparent enough. The Commission issued guidance on the subject in 2021, but should we be doing more? Our digital fairness fitness check should help us answer these questions. Another topic we are looking at is online targeted advertising, as we know that over 90% of consumers express concerns about it. We are also discussing with business how to help consumers better understand digital advertising, including by addressing the issue of being asked over and over again about cookies when we are browsing online. There's a cookie fatigue, you know that. This is why I invited all relevant stakeholders, businesses, consumer organizations, representatives of DPAs and experts to gather around a table to discuss the solutions to address the issues related to cookies. The objective is to explore the possibility to launch, by the end of the year, a voluntary cookies pledge. And we have discussed also that with the Federal Trade Commission, with Lina Khan, the chairwoman of the FTC in the US, because the same concerns are in the US. And what is possible to do to answer to such a kind of concern with technical solutions, or it's possible to simplify the life of the users with technical solutions, or it's possible to give a better information to the user, but maybe it's possible to have some limitation about the targeting that is for the moment organized by the different actors. With regard to the AI Act, I mentioned earlier, the newly adopted General Product Safety Regulation now requires AI products to meet general safety requirements. But what about technology that is being developed as we speak? Generative pre-trained transformers like ChatGPT also raise concerns about consumer rights and data protection. We have seen many have called on the need to take action. On the data protection side, the EDPB and the national data protection authorities have already started looking into this. And earlier this year, the European Consumer Organization, BEUC, called for an assessment of the impact of ChatGPT on consumer rights. The Commission is following closely the matter in close consultation with national consumer organizations too. And so it will be very important to try to discuss again about the evolution of artificial intelligence, but also to be sure that all the products are in full compliance with the GDPR, that there is a real consent about the use of personal data. There are some limitations in data retention, and there are some real protection, to give an example, for the children to have an access to some kind of AI applications. And it was on such a basis that it was possible in Italy for the Data Protection Authority to take a decision about ChatGPT on the basis of the GDPR, not on the basis of other kind of regulations. So the full respect for data protection is also a question when you develop an AI app. Having the right laws in place to protect consumers in the digital era is only one piece of the puzzle. We also have to make sure they can be enforced. This is why the Commission has been collecting input to improve the rules on alternative dispute resolution, for example. When I met one major international online retailer earlier this year, to say concretely Amazon, we discussed this in details. Many companies want their own dispute resolution processes to be used by consumers in first resort. Needless to say, this means that online traders need to have effective processes in place. How can we guarantee this, and how could digital tools help with these processes? The European Union is committed not only to a safe digital transition, but to a sustainable transition too. This means greening our data centers and embracing the role of AI in more environmentally friendly industrial processes. But it also means strengthening our rules on corporate sustainability and due diligence. The European Union needs harmonized rules to ensure all businesses address harmful practices on the environment and human rights abuses, including in the tech sector. Many leaders from this sector engage with the European Commission on our proposals, so I know you share our ambition here. Digitalization has also become a necessity for upholding core principles of the European Union, including the rule of law. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, the digitalization of national justice systems was a necessary tool to keep justice flowing during lockdowns. However, the level of digitalization is not the same across the Union. This is why digitalization of justice across Europe has become a major priority of my department and myself. Finally, let me recall the new Digital Europe program with 7 billion euro available for investment in advanced technologies, cybersecurity and skills. This will make Europe more resilient against emerging threats. In 1986, the importance of technology for our single market was clear for the Commission President Jacques Delors, I said. Subsequently, we developed a digital single market that is truly European. What was not fully anticipated at the time was the broader impact digitalization would have on European society. We knew little about the impacts on consumer safety, privacy, or key principles of our treaties, including the values enshrined in Article 2, such as the rule of law. But as we have embraced the digital revolution, the EU has strived to uphold fundamental rights and European values at home and abroad. Yes, there are many questions that remain. This is why exchanges as the ones held today remain very useful, and it's very important to try to convince maybe some like-minded partners in the world that if the European Union is the champion of the regulation, because I've listened to some comments on this many times, it's maybe useful to think about some kind of regulations to protect the fundamental rights and to protect our values. And just to give you an example, we'll maybe exchange on this, but to give you an example, if we have the GDPR into place since 5 years, it's for many reasons. But one of the reasons was to avoid fragmentation in the EU and to don't have 20, 25, 27, before the Brexit, maybe 28, different privacy legislation in Europe. Maybe one day it will be possible on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean to think about a federal privacy law due to the fact that it will be more and more difficult to be in full compliance with the different legislations at the state level that we have seen from one day to another one. So nobody knows. But again, we are very open to exchange on all those issues with the like-minded partners. That means that I'm not sure that we'll engage a conversation with China about a possible adequacy decision. I'm not sure that we will receive exactly the same protection from the personal data in China. But we have engaged a Trade and Technology Council not only with the US, very recently also with India. So it's maybe possible to make progress with more and more partners abroad. But thanks for such an opportunity to explain what we are doing now in the EU about all those different topics. And I'm sure that you have had very interesting discussions on this during all the day. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Very interesting. So we only have time for a few questions, but I am privileged to be the one that holds that time. So thank you once again for very interesting conversations and speeches from your side. So for us, the data transfer framework, it seems to be a never-ending story, right? First we had one, safe harbor, now, yeah. And now we had Biden's order, but still we have the big fine for Meta now, and the challenging the framework one more time. How worried are you that we will find a robust solution this time?
I'm quite sure that we have a robust solution, not only because I have negotiated myself the solution during 18 months, but because we have tried to organize a totally different process than before. Just to give you an example, before, about the so-called redress, it was possible to take contact with an ombudsperson in the State Department. And before the Court of Justice, it was quite difficult to explain that we had a really independent body in charge of such a redress. Now, we have had long discussions, and in the executive order signed by the President Biden, we have organized a review court, a real review court, an administrative court, in charge of that, and with many safeguards to protect the independence of the members of the court that will be appointed by the Attorney General, and with new competence from the court. Now it will be possible to investigate about the possible access by the intelligence agencies to the personnel data, with some capacity to take binding decisions, and to have a representation by a lawyer for the European citizens before the court, because we are speaking about the national security issue. So I'm quite confident. Of course, I'm also sure that we will have to defend such a new adequacy decision, if it's possible to take that very soon, not only before the member states, the parliament, the DPB and all the actors, but also before the Court of Justice. But that is logical, because the use of personal data is a part of the business model of the big tech, but the way to go to the court is a part of the business model of Mr. Schrems. So we will have a Schrems 3 decision. I'm more confident that it will be a positive one this time, because we have, again, a robust solution taking into account the level of the protection, but also the different systems that we have. Just to conclude and to give you a comparison, some months ago, without many comments, we have taken an adequacy decision about South Korea. I was in South Korea, in Japan, some weeks ago. We have a good protection in Japan and in South Korea, but of course not exactly with the same mechanism that in Europe. They have their own system, but we have assessed the system and we have a good protection. Like I said, the protection is traveling with the data. I'm sure that now we have put into place a good system with the US, and if I have an advice to give to all the people having a doubt, please test the system. If you have a doubt, go to the court when we'll have the court in the next month into place, and you will see. If it's not functioning, we'll have a discussion. But why all the time to go to the European Court of Justice before a real test of the functioning of the new system in the US? We'll see.
We must say that we really hope to have a robust framework. It is our biggest trading partner and, of course, the biggest security partner also. So, I mean, we've heard a lot of regulation. We've discussed the AI Act. We've discussed the Data Act, a little bit more controversial. But we also heard, a few figures like 5% of the world's unicorns, difficult to scale. 4 out of 5 CEOs are moving their investment to North America. I mean, this is not so encouraging, right? So it seems that we are getting something, the protections right, but maybe we don't get the kind of the growth potential of the internal market right. So thinking about this, maybe your evaluation is different, then please challenge that. But if you should give one piece of advice to the next commission, I know that we're not done yet, but looking ahead, what would that be?
But first of all, to be flexible, because at the beginning of the mandate of this commission, we are sure that we had 2 main priorities, the green transition and the digital transition. And after some months, it was needed to fight against the pandemic. And when we have had the opportunity to go out of the pandemic slowly on the 24th of February last year was the war in Ukraine. So the first advice is to be flexible on all. But then also is to be confident that when we are protecting our values, it's possible, I said, to convince some partners to go in the same direction. And if you look to the story about the GDPR, now we have the same kind of piece of legislation on the 5 continents. And what's very important for the EU is to, in the future, is to continue to invest in innovation and to develop maybe the investment of innovation, but also to try to explain why it's so important to protect the values. Because, and maybe the war in Ukraine explained better that than many other comments. If we want to continue to have the capacity to live in democracy, with a full respect for the fundamental rights, with a real respect for the rule of law, it's important to show that in all the activities we are working to protect the values. And what we are doing with the data privacy framework with the US is again to protect the personal data. And when you spoke about many different pieces of legislation, is it normal or not to ask to the major actor in the digital world to remove hate speech from their platforms, to remove unsafe products from their platforms? And en passant, 50% of the unsafe products in Europe are coming from China. But also to have a full respect for individual rights, fundamental rights. It's possible to convince more and more partners. The reason why I will say for the next Commission, please continue to invest in innovation, to invest in the protection of our values, but also to take part more and more in international discussions, to have international standards. And we have had, just to give an example, in the OECD, for the first time, a common agreement about the access by the government to the personal data, with many partners around the table. So I'm more confident about the capacity maybe to develop digital activities in Europe with such a model, what we call the human-centric approach, but in fact the real protection of the values. And now we will see in the world that it will be important for some like-minded partners to do the same, to stay on the good side of democracy, fundamental rights, and the rule of law.
Thank you so much. One last question. I'm sure that you have, spent all morning reading this very newly publicized sandboxing on the AI Act. It's a piece of work that we have done to basically ask SMEs, how does it work? Do you understand it? Are you going to stay in Europe? Are you going to have a competitive edge or not? How much will it cost to implement, et cetera, et cetera? So this kind of sandboxing exercise with industry is something that is for the first time in the AI Act. It's like official that there needs to be a sandboxing exercise. Do you think this kind of interactive collaboration with industry is something that will stick now, that we really need more of in Europe?
We need to do that more and more, but just to explain what we are doing about some pieces of legislation, I want to make 2 comments. The first one, I have received many reactions in the US, to be very concrete, about the fact, oh, you have so many legislation. Come on. It's possible to speak about the GDPR, but DSA, DMA is now. It's not an old piece of legislation, the DSA or the DMA. And for the rest, we are in negotiations to put into place maybe legislations about AI Act or liability, the civil liability that I'm in charge and so on. So we are in discussions now. It's not a set of pieces of legislation. And the second remark, in many fields, we have tried to work first with voluntary commitment of different actors. I remember the product safety pledge. We have asked to the main online marketplace to be able to remove very fast unsafe products for their platforms. It was a voluntary approach. About hate speech, we have a code of conduct since 2016. And again, we have asked to the main platforms to remove hate speech very fast from their platforms. And after such long discussions and practice with the main actors, now we have the DSA with some mandatory rules to have a level playing field and to be sure that everybody is on board. So we'll continue to do that. I discussed with one minister from one member state some minutes ago about the cookies, and I said the cookie fatigue. But again, there we are trying for the moment to organize before the end of the year a pledge on the cookies, to see with some partners how it's possible to come on a voluntary basis with technical solutions to simplify the life of the user, to give a better information, to put maybe some limitation. And so such an exchange with the main actors in the digital world is very important. And we are doing that. It's not new, but it's true that we need to develop that. And certainly about AI, because nobody knows, certainly not myself, what should be or could be AI in 5 years. If you look back 5 years ago. And so we need to have a future-proof legislation when we are doing that. But again, the GDPR was a future-proof legislation because it's possible to ask to the developer of AI to have full respect for the personal data. And we have had discussion with Sam Altman about that in recent exchange between the US and EU, and I said it's very important to do that, and again, to organize it together. But certainly in a discussion with the business federations and with all the actors in the digital world.
Thank you so much. Allow me to give you a few minutes on stage to just relax. Could we please give a big hand to Reynders and a very good insight into the next legislative proposal. So allow me for just a few minutes to sum up and then handing over to Chris. From my side, I think it's been a day where we have really had like the crunch time, right? We said it's crunch time for the digital decade. You know, being critical is not necessarily bad. And I think we've had some really good discussions, very different views, particularly in the Data Act, we must say. But I also think we have seen, for example, the AI Act being a piece of legislation where there has been really a good collaboration and reaching some common ground, both from industry and from the policymakers. Another example is, of course, our big job with Commissioner Reynders on the transatlantic data flows. It is crunch time, and we need to get this right. We still only have 5% of the world's unicorns. 4 out of 5 CEOs say that they will de-invest from Europe and move their investments to other places in the world. Somehow there is something that we are getting right, something that we are getting wrong. I hope that the next event that we will have is an honest dialogue on how do we boost those scale-ups, how do we boost even more data economy, but through really also creating scale in Europe. Thank you so much for listening, and not least, thank you to the comms team, Samia, Adnan, Kivansh from my team, everybody who has Marta, but not least also Chris that I'm handing over to in a second. Thank you so much for your big efforts in bringing us together for this crunch time to discuss digital legislations. Chris, please take the floor. You can end the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. All that remains for me to say is a big thank you for being here this afternoon. It's been a long afternoon, hasn't it? But it's been a good one. Stay connected with us via LinkedIn, via Twitter on @DigitalEurope. We have a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn that we're trialing, and it's a great way of staying in touch with Digital Europe. Our next event is on the 20th of June. It's a digital deep dive into cloud in particular. I want to say a big goodbye to the online audience. There's been around 400 people watching all day, so thank you to you guys as well. Thank you to our sponsors, Accenture, A-Digital, Amazon, Amatic, Google, and ResMed, and a big thank you to you. Your reward now is a cocktail reception outside the back doors. So have a wonderful afternoon in the Belgian sun, and see you at Digital Europe's next event. Thank you very much.